What's good with the YouTube of Convict's Perspective? It's your boy, Big Flacco. Smashing, dashing, sliding on through with a little bit of energy today, man. Let's get a crack at YouTube. Excuse me, man. I'm just not feeling too good today. But we got an interesting article about a carnal from Salinas. They got caught up in a case back in 1976. It's a real interesting case, but we're going to also elaborate a little bit about this individual's past as well. Jessie Black Jess Gomez de Salinas. Without further ado, I'm gonna let Rojo get to this article. And as always, we're gonna give you guys a convict's perspective.
Actually, man, what we got here is the reversal by the governor of the parole board's decision to release Jesse Gomez, CDC number B80247, with his indeterminate sentence parole release review. We got the official document from the California courts. And I don't feel too good either, so bear with me. If me and Flacco sound like shit today, we're working through it. You know what I'm saying? So, statement of facts. Jesse Black Jess Gomez, Robert Rocha, and Rafael Gabriel were all members of the Nuestra Familia. Richard Din Castro, a high-level gang leader, ordered Mr. Gomez, Mr. Rocha, and Mr. Gabriel to kill 19-year-old Gloria Rice. Miss Rice had testified against another Nuestra Familia member who had murdered her husband. On December 31st, 1976, Mr. Rocha served as lookout while Mr. Gomez and Mr. Gabriel stabbed Miss Rice 94 times, killing her. Mr. Gomez, Mr. Rocha, and Mr. Gabriel then fled on foot. As commissioner, the question I must answer is whether Mr. Gomez will pose a current danger to the public if released from prison. The circumstances of the crime could provide evidence of current dangerousness when the record also establishes that something in the inmate's pre or post incarceration history or the inmate's current demeanor and mental state indicate that the circumstances of the crime remain probative of current dangerousness. In regards to Lawrence 2008 44 Cal 4th 1181 1214. The Board of Parole Hearings found Mr. Gomez suitable for parole based on his age, acceptance of his responsibility, support, insight, self-help programming, and parole plans. I acknowledge Mr. Gomez has made efforts to improve himself during his 37 years of incarceration. He has not been disciplined for serious misconduct since 2010. He has participated in self-help programs, including Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous, Criminal and Gang Members Anonymous, and Anger Management. He routinely received average work ratings. In 2014, a correctional officer commended Mr. Gomez for working with little direction and being quick to volunteer when needs arise. I commend Mr. Gomez for taking these positive steps, but they are outweighed by negative factors that demonstrate he remains unsuitable for parole. Bear with me, I'm changing the pages, y'all. Mr. Gomez's crime was vicious and calculated. He and a fellow gang member brutally stabbed Mrs. Rice after she testified against another gang member who murdered her husband. Mr. Gomez reported that he and his crime partner stabbed Miss Rice 94 times to send a message to the community about what would happen to anyone who defied the gang. For decades, Mr. Gomez was extensively involved in violent crime. While incarcerated, Mr. Gomez joined the Nuestra Familia and took on a leadership position within the gang. He carried out assaults, ordered hits, and recruited new members as a gang lieutenant. Confidential information in Mr. Gomez's file suggests that he was involved in threats against staff, as well as drug trafficking as recently as 2007. He has been disciplined for serious misconduct 50 times. More than 20 of these rule violations were for violent or threatening behavior, including assaulting staff, fighting, spitting in staff members' faces, and throwing urine at staff. He still must serve an additional 4-year term for stabbing a member of a rival gang faction. As recently as 2010, Mr. Gomez instigated a fight when another inmate changed the television station in a classroom where Mr. Gomez was a teacher's aide. Mr. Gomez shoved his desk aside and began punching the inmate. Mr. Gomez also continues to minimize the extent of his participation in his prison gang. At the 2014 hearing, Mr. Gomez adamantly denied ordering any assaults on other inmates. He told the psychologist who evaluated him in 2014 that he never specifically harmed anyone. when he was a gang member, a claim he reiterated at his most recent hearing. Mr. Gomez's denial is simply not credible based on his record. Debriefing inmates reported that Mr. Gomez ordered at least 7 assaults, and the record clearly shows that he committed many others himself. In one instance, Mr. Gomez handed another inmate a weapon and told him to stab as many members of a rival gang as he could. By minimizing the violent nature of his activity and leadership in the Nuestra Familia, Mr. Gomez diminishes his years as active participation and shows that he is not fully committed to honestly addressing these issues and turning away from the gangs and violence. Even at age 59, after distancing himself from the gang and completing multiple self-help classes of anger management, Mr. Gomez still was unable to refrain from violence. Mr. Gomez must do now more to show that he is prepared to lead a different life than the one he lived in the past before he can be released. I encourage him to engage deeply in self-help programming to help him come to terms with his past violence and better develop his anger management skills. I have considered the evidence in the record that is relevant to whether Mr. Gomez is currently dangerous. When considered as a whole, I find the evidence I have discussed shows why he currently poses an unreasonable danger to society if released from prison. Therefore, I reverse the decision of the parole board to parole Mr. Gomez. Signed, Edmund G. Brown Jr., Governor, State of California, March 27, 2015.
Wow. So Jesse Gomez, Black Jess, a little bit of history about this individual. Was recruited into the NF around 1974. Was a stalwart NF member within the organization for years. Was very close with MC. They joined the organization around the same time. This man had over like a 20-something year career. I think his falling out of graces occurred around sometime in the mid to late 90s within the organization. At that time, we already know what happened with old man. You know what I mean? Rafas from Fresno. As he tried to, both these individuals were very instrumental in trying to create a peace at that time with the Mexican mafia. He's one of the ones that was sending letters to senators, other board members out in the streets, and other community advocates for prisoners associations trying to form this peace treaty to get to the governor. It wasn't just old man. So when they talk about influential members, it was Black Jess was also one that was involved in this. He ended up meeting his demise and ended up being deemed no good and expelled from the organization. Like I said, sometime in the 90s. Which further it's kind of interesting, right? Because there's been 2 Black Jesses that have been influential in the NF's history. One from Chicas, and then one from Salinas. Both these individuals were deemed no good. Well, Black Jess from Chicas, he was deemed no good for trying to create a peace treaty and for beliefs that he was working with the administration as an possible informant. But he was also trying to create that peace treaty. Now, this Black Jess from Salinas, it's kind of ironic because the time frame when he kind of fell out of favor is at the same time when MC fell out of favor as well. You know, so I don't know if Brown Bob had a lot of issues to do with this because old man got hit as well. But like I said, old man from Fresno wasn't the only one that was involved in trying to create that peace treaty with the MA back in the 90s. Boxer Niquez talks about it. You also have Diablo from Tracy talks about it. There was peace talks at one time regarding the NF and MA, but a lot of those peace talks were occurring without the representation or clearance from brass. So you had a lot of NF members that were going rogue and some were supporting others while others weren't, if that makes sense. And so back to this case at hand, though, that's a little bit about Black Jess. Let me give you my little perspective of it. Accountability, first and foremost. If you're doing a life sentence, right, they're kicking a lot of people now out. They're granting release for people who've committed murders like 20, 30 years ago. But the one thing they want to hear is accountability. You know what I mean? And I don't think a person who's not accountable for their past gang actions, I think that if he would go in there with a mindset like, look, I was involved with the NF at one time. I was involved in this crime. I've rehabilitated myself. You're going to have a lot more action and access to be granted parole, as opposed to if you're denying your actions, you're denying your the things that you did. Look at Fig. Fig got out when he had been convicted of 4 hot ones. You know what I mean? One he committed behind the walls. The other he was suspected of either being involved in or ordering those green lights. Yeah, he's now out there on the streets. So someone like Fig, all these other cats, Bo, all these individuals that caught their crimes over 40 years ago are giving access to parole. It all comes to accountability. And that's the only thing I see in this. Not to say anything, I don't know the individual. One of his, I know some people that do know him, and they've all said good things about him. You know what I'm saying? He's changed his ways. He's gone down a different direction. I think he ended up in Mill Creek around 2000. But accountability is key if you ever want to see the streets again, my brother.
No doubt, man. And I'm going to add to that a little bit, man. It's like when you've been down this amount of time, you know, you're obviously an intelligent dude, or you never would have climbed up the ranks like you did. You know what them people want to hear at the parole board. You know what the people in charge, you know, of you going home want to hear you say. You know, all the going in there and just you're already no longer with the group. You know, you already done debriefed, you already done whatever you did. Why not put on a show for these people? You know, if you want to go home. You know, and I get it. He's been out of the loop for a long time and he's still getting into things. People are in prison, bro. People are going to say shit. People are going to challenge you. People are going to do this. People are going to do that. But, you know, you see an example in there of somebody changing the TV. Man, who gives a shit, bro? If you're trying to go home, you've been down 30 years, change the TV. You got TV in your cell, bro. You know what I mean? You're worried about the state's TV inside of a classroom. And those aren't the kind of things that'll get you out, man, because they're watching. And then you start putting them things on him, you know, and he's crying and telling, it's over. You're a big bad gang member. Even though you're not active, they know you killed people and they see another violent act. All you people out there doing life, I know you got phones and you're listening. Remember what them people want to hear, bro. They want to hear empathy for your victims. They want to hear you were young and made a mistake and you were influenced. They don't want to hear you downplaying your involvement shit and not accepting, what did Flacco say? Accountability. You know, if you're not in that lifestyle no more, you know, you don't got to go tell on people and get other people in trouble. But man, what you did, just cop to it. Man, you were sorry. You were young. Man, you're going to go home probably, bro. There's no reason to keep playing tough guy. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to fly. And you see right here, the parole board approved it. Governor said, nah, hell with that. You know, so you gotta go in there and act like you would think they want you to act, bro. You know?
You got to remember too, bro. He had over 20 years as a member. I heard he was in Tehachapi Shoe getting off, handling business. I heard he caught a couple other potential big others in there, bro, some serious stuff. They know all this stuff. Where they can prove it and find you guilty of it or not, they have access to all your debriefing reports. You know what I'm saying? And I hope the dude gets out, man, because, you know, after that much extended time, change your life. Apparently, there's some good things that he has done. And what's interesting about this article, man, that's you hear the common name Rocha, that's one of Mateo's old family members right there. I was told, you know?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, man, when you mentioned when he got put on the list, I'll tell you for a fact, it wasn't in 1996. It wasn't on there yet. Whether it should have been or not, I don't know. In 98, when I was in C10, it was on the list. And it was up there at the top of the list. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, an individual with that kind of influence and that kind of history is going to be on top of the list above other people. Not that the list is necessarily in chronological or order of importance, but that struck me out because I thought it was the other Black Jess at first. You know what I mean? And I had to re-clarify on who it was.
The other black Jess, they ended up whacking. They killed, bro. You know what I mean? This black Jess, the bad thing about it, right? And this is just me being real.
Yeah.
Is they deemed him no good for trying to create a peace treaty. There was no other infractions. There was no other complaints. There was no other articles that he violated to be deemed, you know, to make an a cowardice or desertion or traitor. Him being on the side of creating that peace treaty is what they deemed him for. So now you have, let's fast track 14 years later, you have an end to all hostilities. And, you know, this dude's in the hat now. You know what I'm saying? So I think, you know, it'd be hard, man, to be out there in these yards, man. Some of these dudes been putting in work since the 70s, bro, when it was treacherous. It would be hard, for, like, personally, if you put in all that time, now to be expelled from the organization, 10 years, 12 years later, 14 years later, there's now a peace treaty that you tried to push at the time, years later. Now, you know what I mean? That's just the crazy thing about it. Someone brought that to my attention, and they gave me the whole rundown about this individual. That's the only reason why they deemed him from the organization, was trying to create that peace treaty. 14 years later, here they have end the hostilities, which allow a peace treaty. You know what I'm saying? Because he had the same vision with old man and all that. Like we've heard, man, like when old man got hit, by Brown Bob, had him hit, you know, Black Jess was in the same boat. It says that there was other high-ranking C's that were supporting that. Black Jess was one of them. So here you have a whole bunch of C's that fell out of favor in the late 90s, trying to push an agenda to get back out there to the main lines. You know what I mean? I'd be pissed off personally, man. If I made that type of commitment, you know what I'm saying? And then years later, I get deemed no good, but these individuals do the same thing and they're still out there active. I'd be pissed off.
You know what I find interesting, man, is the terms that are used that, you know, apply to the same activity. You know, you got a door policy, you got end of hostilities, you got whatever the case might be. It's the same thing. It's basically an order, directive, proclamation, whatever you want to call it, to not engage in what is considered an enemy. I don't know if people assume that the fancy titles, stand your ground, door policy, end of hostilities, you know, that the manipulation of words downplays the actual act itself. I mean, is the door policy really any different than the end of hostilities? No. If you have a chance to engage with this enemy, historical enemy, and you don't do it, it don't matter if it's because of an open door. It don't matter any situation. You're not engaging with a historical enemy, period. I don't know. That's just my opinion. And I could be wrong. There might be a different philosophy behind it. But any way I look at it unfolding, you know, being described, it is what it is. We're not engaging with the enemy right now. So what is that?
You know, it's kind of a delicate topic because you're kind of right about it. I get the theory behind it, man. You know what I mean? Why come out and inflict a bruise or two and risk putting your life in danger? And so I remember when I seen the straight directives on this order, it was unless you plan to take them out, right? Or unless they had disrespected us, and we tried to go about it diplomatically, and that group didn't deal with their person right, then we're going to deal with that individual first chance. But I get it, man, because think about it, man. There was a lot of dudes in the late 80s and 90s that were on those yards. Carnales and NR members. There used to be a lot of undercover C's out there, a lot of NR members that went to battle with the opposition. The whole point back then in the ideologies of the NF was that we could not be on a yard with any MA or AB members. You know what I'm saying? So anytime we got to anyone that we thought was either an AB, MA member or a close associate, we were going to engage on the yard. We could not walk the yard with them. So here you have a lot of people who made sacrifices on these yards, spilled blood, even been stabbed as well, get to the shoot, get validated, and here you're told stand down on your enemy. A lot of people really didn't like that, bro. You know, because they're like, okay, on the main line, we're supposed to do this and do that. We're coexisting with them over here. Why couldn't we just coexist with them out there? Why are we jeopardizing our mainline status?
Yeah.
Bringing attention from
getting 3 strikes.
You know, people were getting struck out. You know what I mean? Taken off the yards, and you know what I mean? Jeopardizing their mainline status, just to go up there to be, you know what I mean, to share packages and revistas and all that with each other. Which, don't get me wrong, is a good thing. I'm just saying that there was consequences for other people's actions. You know what I mean? All that was put in motion. I'm very supportive. I'm very supportive of peace, but I'm not going to be mistoken. This peace situation is all about the money. We know that. You know what I mean? But I think it's a good thing regardless of what these organizations are doing, regardless that I'm not for promoting any type of criminal activity. I'm not for any criminal organizations. I do feel that they deserve rights to be out there in these main lines. So it's just it's crazy how people flip politics when it pertains to them. When the higher command, okay, this is how we value it. This is how we want it here, but you guys need to be doing this over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Instead of a universal policy that applies to everybody, it's all one group functioning for the same purpose. Should be one policy.
Well, if we're supposed to whack the MAs everywhere we're at, why wouldn't we whack them here then? That's the whole thing that, you know what I mean? I never understood. If this is supposed to, I mean, we're ingrained and we're indoctrinated and we're planted that seed that the MA is the enemy. You know what I mean? That get Moscow, you know what I mean? Forget them. They used to drop like flies in the 70s. They're our number one enemy. They're out to oppress our people and take over and dominate our raza and this and that. You know what I mean? They're trying to put their foot on our neck. We're taught all this stuff. Yet here we are in the shoe and we're coexisting. You know what I'm saying? And yet then we're supposed to stand down if the door pops open. I never really understood that, man. I'm like, I used to sit there and think in the shoe, I go, man, are these dudes really out to oppress me? No, they're not. They're only worried about themselves. I heard from some one individual. He talked to an MA member that was from like the 80s, old time. And he's on the main line right now. He's currently in prison. And the person asked him, you know, are you guys tripping off the NF? You know, going out there after the main line. And he told this individual, we ain't been tripping off them since 1980. So this whole facade about, you know, corruption and war and all that, that was just passed down to the Norteños and Sudanos just to keep that fight going. These dudes have not been concerned about us for years. And if you really think about it, when we've done time with them in the shoe, they really didn't give a fuck about us. They were respectful, they'd conversate, but whatever activities we were doing, they could care less. So I always used to trip like, man, if this is our enemy and they're out to oppress us, why am I chopping up with this vato? Why is he being so female? Why is he looking out for me? Why is he shooting me revistas in a paquete and all that? We should be trying to kill each other. You know, but it goes back to that whole common thing about, look, you're in the shoe. A lot of you guys are going to be there for 5, 10 years. These are your neighbors. Do you want to have neighbors that you don't get along with? And you're always soldiering or attacking or you have to worry about? Or would you rather coexist and get along? So, it's a delicate subject, man.
Like you're saying, though, if you can coexist and get along in the shoe, coexist and get along everywhere, man. There's a lot more room to wiggle and handle business and stuff on main lines. You know what I mean? You don't even got to, like I tell people, man, I think it's good, you know, just to allow people to be able to go home. And the end goal ultimately is to control things financially everywhere. Well, the main part of that's always going to be on the streets. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of money with cell phones and other contraband in prison. You could ball out. I have a homeboy I talk to all the time. Bro, in 1 month, he stacked $34,000 off of cell phones. $34,000 in a month, bro. Astronomical. He doesn't answer to nobody anymore. He used to be one of our people. You know what I'm saying? So that's all in his pocket. But if there's wiggle room like that everywhere, why things like that can allow everybody in your group to live well, bro. You know what I mean? I don't know. I like it too, bro. I like it too. I mean, is it right in theory? That's not for me to decide. I didn't make the rules. I don't enforce them. None of that. But I think it's good for the long term, bro. The end game. You know what I mean? Take off on these dudes now and show our dominance or attempt to, or do we build an empire over the next 10 years where everybody's taken care of, everybody's going home to stuff, everybody's, you're not in your care package, you're not getting a little sliver of soap, a little, syrup pack full of toothpaste, you're getting plugged. You know what I mean? You're getting a cell phone, you're getting some weed, you know what I mean?
But Ro, think about it though. If they would have been doing this stuff in the shoe, right? Like kicking off war, right? Like say if we would have speared one of them, we would have hit him with a crossbow or something. That stuff would not have stopped anywhere in there, bro. Every day we'd be getting hit or they'd getting hit. I think both sides actually knew that, man. Because you know what I mean? I really think because besides the numbers, yeah, they got the numbers, majority in the main line. In the shoe, it's a little bit different. Because it seemed like they used to like to validate Northerners and NF members a lot more than MA members. You know what I'm saying? It always used to seem like we
By
had
far.
we had equal numbers in there, because they were not just with them. They would validate you as either an MA member or MA associate, and that would be hard for them to validate because they had no subgroups at that time. Whereas the NF had the Nosarasa, they had the Northern structure, so they could validate you either as NF or Northern structure. So when you went to a mainline in prison, there was very few prisons where the numbers were equal. You know what I'm saying? Maybe Solano, maybe Susanville, maybe Soledad. You know what I'm saying? Maybe New Folsom Sea Yard for a minute, you know? But most of the time, you're going to be outnumbered on most yards. Here you have the shoe. You could be in a pod where it's all NF, all structure, and one MA, one Sureño, and you could be in another pod where it's vice versa. So it kind of makes sense to where you're jeopardizing your other people by your actions over here. I mean, look at the D facility stuff that happened just between the NF over there. They were spearing each other. They were moving on each other. They were moving from cell to cell. Homeboys were taking off on this homeboy. That shit got crazy, man. No one talks about that. So I think that may have also played a role in it. I'm just trying to think outside the box of where were the heads of these leaderships? Why did they make the choices they made? You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the reality of it. You know what I mean? You can't, if you're constantly at war in the shoe, right? Trying to kill each other and try to hit each other, it takes that much more time from making money, from scheming, from putting ventures together, and from doing all the things. And let's just keep it 100. Both sides here, they like that money. So therefore, let's coexist and let's not have drama, so we can all go back to our own ventures and control our own domains and our territories.
Hey, I'll tell you what, man. Prior to two things, man. Prior to the end of hostilities and prior to the mass availability of cell phones, what do you think a yard was making in 92 compared to, or 95 to 2020? Bro, yards are balling nowadays, bro. The income's nowhere near the same. You know what I mean? And there's two reasons. It's because of the end of hostilities, and it's because of the availability of cell phones.
Oh yeah.
And none of that stuff would have been possible if you were stabbing each other, spearing each other, crossbowing each other, all that shit in Pelican Bay or Corcoran or wherever. So without that, there would be no end to hostilities, because they'd be like, what do you mean you guys can get along? There was 13 crossbowings in the last 2 months.
Okay, let me ask you something then. What do you think people like Black Jess and Rafas, what do you think they were thinking at the time when they tried to present this peace treaty?
Same thing, long-term benefits.
Well, Rafas got his getbacks, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I mean?
As far as what?
After he got hit. I think he actually had his getbacks for a minute, if I'm not mistaken. Do you remember that?
I'm not 100%.
Because he was actually on the mess up, if I'm not mistaken. He was actually hold one of those general positions, if I'm not mistaken, bro. I'm almost positive of that.
Yeah, I don't know whether he did or did not after that. I'm not sure. Something.
I could be wrong.
I don't know.
I could have sworn I heard from Chuko talking about, you know what I mean? People were worried about who was gonna have to take care of him and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because how old he was.
Hey, it could be. You never know, bro. Never know. Anyway, YouTube, man, this is just a little bit about Black Jess from Salinas. And a little bit about how these people with these life sentences get done. You think you go to parole and go home. Now, the governor still got to review it. You know, if one person doesn't like it, man, you got to be humble. You know what I mean? You got to show empathy. You know, you got to present yourself in a way that person and them people in that room would think, he ain't going to bother nobody else. You know, you got to know, as somebody who's done all this prison time and as a member of any of the groups, there's going to have been 100 people who debriefed and told everything you've done, your dog did, everything. You know what I mean? So just think everything you've done when you go into them parole hearings, and just be humble. Show remorse. Even if you're faking it, do you want to go home or not? You know what I mean?
I got a question for you. I got a question before we end this, Rojo.
Yeah.
So now in like the last, let's say 8 years, they've been releasing people from life sentences. You know what I mean? In our time era, if you had life, 25 to life, you get rejected every time you went to the parole board. No governor was going to let you out or nothing. Do you think now that this gives more people incentives to leave that lifestyle and drop out that have life sentences based upon the fact that they know if they continue down that gang path, they're never going to see the streets again? Because I don't think there's any active NF member or MA or AB or whatnot that has a life sentence that's ever going to get granted parole, period, as long as they're active. I'm just wondering how, I mean, with the changes now in the system, how many more people are going to have that incentive? Okay, they're 15 years into their life sentence, or 18 years, 17 years, if you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
That decide to flip around that time, just to have that action at parole. It's no longer how it was in California, to where you catch a murder case, you're doing life. It doesn't matter if you get 10 to life, 15 to life, they're not granting you parole. Nowadays, they're granting you parole. So I'm wondering how much is that going to affect people who maybe they're running this game for maybe 12 years, 20 years, and all of a sudden they start to think, man, I have action to get out if I change my ways. I'm just wondering about that. What do you think?
Of course, man. All that stuff's an incentive, bro. You know, it all depends on the individual, if they're, you know, realizing this, or, you know, what their personal goals are, man. But in the back of everybody's mind, you got to know, if you're in that lifestyle, the people responsible for letting you out are going to know whether you are or not. You know, and if you are, they're not going to put an active, it's not going to happen. It's just,
I could name 5 people who were hardcore NF members who had multiple murders that have been out in the last 7 years who got released.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Who were involved in like 100 times worse things than what you hear about these carnalities being involved in today. So it's just something I just was thinking about, man. You know what I mean?
how many of them are active that got out?
None of them.
There it is there. Now, don't get it twisted. We're not encouraging or discouraging you to do anything, but we're just giving you some information.
No, we're not. You know what I mean? I don't.
Do your thing how you see fit. But just know, man, to get out of them parole boards, man, they're going to want to hear about how you're not a danger. And you got to know how to explain that, man. That's what it boils down to. Black Jess, historical figure. Me and Flacco, we're out of here. We'll holler at you later. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. You too.